Hello world, and welcome back to another episode of Grace for Her. I'm your host, Hannah Jenkins, and I'm so excited for you being back here with me. Listen, if this is your first time tuning in, welcome. This podcast is all about learning to extend grace to ourselves while walking boldly in faith, growing through life's challenges, and stepping into our God-given purpose. Last episode, we talked about grace for action and the importance of moving in faith, even when we don't feel ready. But let's be honest, starting is one thing, but staying consistent, that's a whole nother challenge, all right? And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today, and that is grace for consistency. Because let's be real, we've all had those moments where we've started something strong, full of motivation and excitement, but then life happens and the distractions come, the doubts creep in, and we get tired, discouraged, or maybe even bored. And then we find ourselves back at square one, wondering why we can't seem to stay committed to what we started. And that within itself can make you feel like a failure, like a disappointment, because you're wondering, why can't I stay consistent? Why can't I continue with this? Why do I keep stopping and starting over and stopping and starting over? And it's just this never-ending cycle, right? But here's the truth. Consistency isn't about being perfect. It's about being faithful. And that's just like the grace that gives us room to grow. That's why we're talking about giving grace to ourselves, because it's grace that keeps us strong. And I resonate with this episode so much because of the fact that I struggled with the consistency of this podcast. I started this back in September 2020, and I think it was probably around year 2022. Around 2022 that I kind of started losing the motivation, started getting distracted. The doubt was creeping in for me. And what started off like as a small little break turned into like a 1.5 year thing. And then I tried to start all over again back in September of last year. But that probably just wasn't the best time either, because we were in the middle of a move. We were only up here in Georgia, I think for like 2 months at the time. And I was just like, I'm just going to start, like last episode we were talking about, just action, just start. Don't forsake your humble beginnings, right? And so I was just like, I'm just going to start. But things were just happening and I was not being consistent. And I was just like, Lord, I feel like I'm failing you. I'm not doing what you called me to do. I'm not being obedient. And it was just a disaster. But I want to remind you guys of Galatians 6:9. And it's one of my favorite scriptures that says, let's not grow weary in our well-doing, for we shall reap a harvest if we faint not. And the truth of the matter is that you got to keep going, because if you stop, you're not going to see your harvest. If you quit, it's never going to come. And so you have to be willing to push forward and keep going, and it can be hard and it can be difficult, but we don't want to grow tired in our well-doing. We want to keep going. And I just want to remind you of that today, because sometimes it can feel like we're putting in all of this effort and seeing no results. We pray, we work, we show up, and it seems like nothing's happening. But like I mentioned before, the Bible reminds us to keep going, because if we're faithful over the few things, He can give us much. And there is a harvest on the other side. Consistency is hard because it requires faith that we can't see. It means trusting in the very small effort, into the disciplined choices, into every act of obedience. It is not seeing immediate results, and that's where the struggle comes in, because we struggle with not seeing the immediate results, right? We live in this world full of instant gratification. We want instant blessings. We want, as I've said before, microwavable blessings instead of the crock pot blessing, right? Think about it. Let's be as simple and practical as food. Think about the difference between a pot roast, microwavable dinner that you pop in the microwave and eat, versus a pot roast that's been sitting in a crock pot for a couple of hours. Which one's gonna taste better? It's gonna taste the one that's been, and I'm talking about pot roast, and I'm vegan, y'all, but I'm just saying, I'm pretty sure that most of y'all can relate to this. But it's going to taste better, the one that had the time to simmer and soak up all the marinade versus the one that was just placed inside of the microwave and nuked, you know? And we are constantly looking for this instant gratification versus actually putting in the effort. And I don't even want to say that we're not putting in the effort, right? Because I don't want to insult anybody to say that you're not working for it. It's just that to stay consistent when your beginnings are humble, when the beginnings aren't these big, pretty boxes with bows on it, when the beginning seems so insignificant and you know that you're working hard, you know that you're putting all this effort forth, and you're not seeing what you think you should be seeing in the time that you think that you should see it, that's when it becomes hard. And so I kind of want to share a couple of things that I personally have wrestled with in regards to being consistent. And the first one is relying on motivation instead of discipline. Look, motivation is great, but it's also unreliable because some days you just don't feel inspired. Some days you don't feel energized to take action. There are days where you just want to curl up on the couch and watch TV or do nothing at all. And if we only take action when we feel like it, we'll never build lasting habits. And that's where discipline comes in. And I'm reminded of my student that I spoke with today. He was sharing with me that last semester he felt unmotivated because he suffered an injury. And because of this injury, and he also had like 8 o'clock classes, there were times where he just did not feel motivated to get out of bed to go to his 8 o'clock class. And because of that, he struggled and he didn't finish as strong as he wanted to in that class. I mean, fortunately, he passed, but he didn't pass with the grade that he knew that he was capable of because of the fact that he was unmotivated. And he shared with me that the lesson that he learned from that was that he needed to be more disciplined in this semester. So now he learned not to take 8 o'clock classes anymore. He's taking later classes, but he's making sure that he shows up to all of them even when he doesn't feel like it. And that's discipline. That's the difference between motivation and discipline, because motivation, you don't always feel motivated. You don't always feel energized. You don't always feel like doing the thing. But discipline will have you doing the things that you don't feel like doing in the moment because you know that in the long run it's going to pay off. And so discipline says, like I said, even when I don't feel like it, I'm going to show up. I'm going to see the progress. And once I see the progress, it's going to, it's going to benefit me. It's going to make me happy. Think about working out. Like, I don't necessarily love getting up to go work out because I'd rather stay in the bed. But once I get to the gym and I start working out, I start to feel better. And when I'm done with my workout, I feel good that I did it, And so that's why, again, you need discipline to help you get past the instant gratification and know that you're working for long-term transformation, because that is what we want. We want transformation, and that is only going to come from discipline. The second thing that I have learned in regards to consistency is fear of imperfection or failure. Okay, so this is like getting real personal, because like sometimes, and I don't even want to say I struggle with consistency because I'm afraid that things won't go perfectly. And that was one of the things, like when I started this podcast back up in September of last year, like we didn't even have our furniture in the house yet. If y'all go look at some of the episodes from before, you will see that I was sitting in a lawn chair because we did not have our furniture up here yet. And I was just like, nope, this is my humble beginning. I'm starting, but it bothered me. And I really had to just let that go, because it's not about perfection. It's about progression. And I know this, right? But even though I know this, I still sometimes struggle with wanting things to go perfectly and thinking that if I can't do it 100% right, I don't want to do it at all. But that will keep you from moving and taking action. At least I know that's what it's done for me. When I'm so focused on things being perfect and wanting to stop the tape, to re-record and all this other stuff, it will frustrate me. It will make me feel like giving up and quitting because I feel like I can't get right. And the thing is that that's when I'm really trying to do it in my own strength. I'm trying to do it in my own power instead of leaning on God. If I truly believe that God has called me to do this podcast and to just share my journey of learning how to give myself grace and trying to help others extend grace to themselves, then I shouldn't worry about the perfection, right? I shouldn't worry about how it looks because who is supposed to reach is going to reach because God knows who it's for, right? And I can't, a part of that whole perfection thing too, again, just being transparent, comes from me looking at other podcasts and how other people are doing it and comparing myself to them. There is only one version of this Hannah. And I have to be okay with who she is, how she does things, and exactly where she is right now in her life. I can't try to be like anybody else because now I'm becoming a carbon copy and I'm an original. Nobody else is going to do it like me, just like I'm not going to be able to do it like anybody else. So when I'm allowing myself to believe the lie that there's this standard of perfectionism that I need to reach, I'm only setting myself up for failure when I do that. And I want to encourage you guys not to do that either, but to embrace who you are right where you are, knowing that even though everything doesn't go perfect, it's all going to work together for the good. Progress isn't about being perfect. It's about being persistent. The small imperfect steps are still steps in the right direction. And I just want to say that again. The small imperfect steps are still steps in the right direction, because when we may mess up or we may see a mistake, they're all opportunities for us to learn. It doesn't have to be a failure. It doesn't have to be a reason for quitting. It's a reason for learning and growing. And another thing that I have learned on this journey is that that can mess up with consistency is distractions and overcommitment. And that will cause us to fall off track, right? When we're doing too much. And when I think about that, it reminds me of the parable of the talents, right? And there's so many revelations that I personally get out of that parable and out of that passage. But one of the main things that I want to share with you today is that there were 3 servants. One was given 5, one was given 2, and one was given 1, right? And one of the profound statements in that parable is that they were each given according to their measure. Listen, when I'm talking about like being overcommitted or overstretching yourself thin, that comes from us taking on more than what God told us to take on. It's more than our measure. It's more than what we have the capacity for. If you have the measure to do 50 million things at one time, then you're not going to feel overwhelmed. You're not going to feel stretched too thin. You're not going to feel like you're always tired and that you can't get stuff done. I have a friend who, when people look at her, they think she's doing too much, or they'll say, oh, she always busy, and she'll tell you, I'm not busy. I have time. I have more time on my hands to spend with my family, to spend with my friends, to spend with God. She'll tell you it's because she has the capacity to do the things that she was given. The servant who was given the 5 had the capacity to handle 5. The servant who was given the 2 had the capacity to deal with the 2. And then there's a servant who was given the 1. And unfortunately, sometimes those of us who have the 1 assignment that we're supposed to focus on, sometimes we feel like that assignment is so insignificant that we sit on it, just like that servant did. And that's why the master told him that he was a wicked servant, because he did not put his gift to use. And I'm here to remind you that if you are the one with the 1 assignment, listen, God is trying to tell you that that assignment is so significant and so important to him. He can't afford you being distracted by anything else. He can't have you worried about all these other things and trying to keep up pace with the one who has the 5. And that's the problem. A lot of times we feel insignificant about the one assignment that we have because we are comparing ourselves to those who have the 5 and the 2. And we're trying to keep up with them, and we were never called to keep up with them. That's not our assignment to keep up with them. That's us trying to be a carbon copy of somebody else. If right now in this season you are called to focus on this one assignment, focus on that assignment. Master that assignment. Stay in your lane and focus on what God has called you to do and wants you to do. Because if you start worrying about all these other things or picking up all these other things that he has not told you to pick up, that's when you're going to feel overwhelmed. That's when you're going to feel stretched too thin. That's when you're going to get burned out. And that's when you're going to see the inconsistency in your life because you're constantly exhausted. You're constantly feeling drained. You have no energy to even do the one thing he called you to do. And yet still we over here wondering, God, what's the next step? God, what else am I supposed to do? He's like, I can't give you anything else until you take care of the one. When you take care of the least of these, he can give you more. If you can't take care of this one thing he's giving you, how can you expect for him to give you more? How can you take on more and you don't have the capacity for the one? Focus on the one. Be okay with the one, right? And that's where we have to learn how to prioritize what truly matters and create space for the things that God has assigned us to do and has asked us to focus on. So I want to give you some practical ways to build consistency, right? And kind of just help you out or share some of the things that I have used to help me, because when life starts lifing and life gets busy, the motivation fails. The obstacles will pop up and we will start to feel the burnout if we're doing too much, right? So I want to just give you 3 practical ways that we can build our consistency to doing the things that God has called us to do. And the first one is to set realistic goals. Have you guys ever heard of SMART goals, right? So SMART goals, are I always forget the S, specific. So SMART goals is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely goals, right? And it's helpful to actually sit and think about these things when you're setting your goals, because one of the biggest mistakes we make in setting goals is that we make them too big too fast. We're trying to go from 0 to 100 overnight, and that's when we will trip up. That's where we'll stumble, and that's where we'll end up quitting because we can't keep up with these high achievable goals that we set ourselves. Instead, we should break them off into smaller. What the world is smaller, Hannah? We should break them up into smaller pieces so that we can achieve them. And that's one of the things that I have had to learn to do, is make my goals more achievable, taking it episode by episode, setting up a plan for myself, actually putting it on my calendar of when I'm going to record, how many episodes I'm going to record, when that's supposed to go out, instead of saying, oh, I'm going to do this whole season and I'm going to record all of the season in one night. No, that's taking on too much. That is putting on more on myself than I can bear, especially when I am a wife, a mother, and I work full time outside of the home, right? So I have to make it achievable for myself. And just breaking it down makes it more manageable. And so that's where that whole measurable part out of SMART goals comes. Another example is like if you're trying to grow spiritually, right? And you're saying that I want to commit to reading the entire Bible in 1 month. Look, if you can do that, share your tips, because I tell you right now, every time I say to myself that I am going to get through the entire Bible, it takes me much longer than I anticipated, because unless I'm going to read the Bible like it's a storybook and just read a chapter a day or read multiple chapters in a day, that ain't gonna happen. There's so much in one verse that I be trying to write down revelations and understand it, that it takes me forever to get through just the chapter, let alone a whole book. And it's 66 books. Listen, set an achievable, measurable, and timely goal for yourself. Start off by reading a few verses a day, and reflecting on them, or even exercising consistency by starting off with 15 to 30 minutes, or even if you got to break that down smaller to 5 to 10 minutes a day, if that's all you could fit in. But make a routine out of it, because routines are what will help build the consistency. I've heard before that it takes 21 days to start a habit. Like, build a routine for yourself that you can achieve consistently to build up your consistency, right? Another thing, as I talk about routines, is creating yourself a system. Listen, I live for structure. I have a routine. If I don't keep to my routine, then things will go haywire. I will feel so off track. I have to schedule things. Like I told y'all, I had to put it on my calendar to schedule time to actually record. I have to put it on my calendar when things like that. Helps me stay organized by putting things on my calendar. Not only does it help me stay organized, but it also helps me stay accountable, because my husband and I, we share the calendar together. So he's able to see the stuff that I put on there, and he'll be like, didn't you say you gonna do this? And so he holds me accountable to the things that I say. And so it's so important to do that. Another thing that I do as far as building routine, every Sunday night is my meal prep. Because of the hour to hour and a half drive that I make in the evening coming home, I get home later in the evening, and I want to be able to spend that time actually with my family, to sit down at the table and eat. I don't want to have to worry about cooking a meal at that time, because that cuts into the time that I could be spending with them, or that cuts into the time for other things that we have to do. And the kids have their tutoring in the evening, they have their different things. So we're all being pulled in a different place. And so to make that more consistent with our family sitting down at the table, I started meal prepping on Sunday for the whole week. And that way the food is already in the refrigerator. All I have to do is take it out and warm it up, and then everybody's able to sit down and eat dinner together. So having your routines, having your schedule, having things set in time, it helps you build that consistency. And so these are just 3 quick ways that can kind of help you. No matter what your goal is, you just got to ask yourself, how can I make things easier to maintain? What systems can I put in place to keep me consistent? And give yourself grace in keeping these goals. All right. I just want to say, there will be days when you're going to miss the mark, and there will be moments where you fall off track. And you know what? That's okay. It's okay. Give yourself grace. Stop beating yourself up. Just reset and keep going. Listen, like I told you, I have started this podcast. This is my 3rd time starting it. And at first I felt bad about that. Like, man, I'm starting it over again. I should just give up and quit. And I was like, no. I know what I believe the Lord has called me to do. I'm going to do it. It doesn't matter how it looks to anybody else. I am going to be obedient. And so that is what I'm doing. Yeah, it may come off differently to other people, and that's all right. I am going to be consistent. I'm going to build up my consistency. Listen, consistency isn't about never failing. It's about never quitting. And I'm going to say that again. Consistency is not about never failing. It's about never quitting. All right. And I just want to encourage you to keep going. Don't allow the obstacles, the lack of motivation, the distractions, the doubt. Don't allow any of that to stop you. Keep going, because when we continue to keep going forward, eventually we will see what it is that we're looking for. So I just want to close with saying to you guys, with this challenge. And And the challenge is, I want you to think about an area in your life where you need to be more consistent. Maybe it's in your spiritual growth. Maybe it's in your relationships or with your health, or even maybe it's in what God has called you to do, your assignment. Whatever it is, I want you to commit to taking one small step today to build up your consistency. And if this episode was encouraging to you, let me know. Connect with me on social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. Share your thoughts. Let me know how you feel, and if this was inspiring to you, share it with a friend. Next episode, we're going to be talking about grace for waiting, because sometimes, even though we're doing all the right things, God will call us to wait. And that waiting season, it's a doozy. You thought this episode was a little transparent for me. That one, all right? Listen, I want you guys to remember that grace is a gift. Embrace it, extend it, and walk boldly in it. And until next time, love y'all. Peace.